This morning I'm going to be in Galatians chapter number 5. Galatians chapter number 5. Galatians chapter number 5, starting in verse number 16, says, "This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. But if ye be led by the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revellings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in the time past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God." This morning I want to ask you, what controls your life? Are you led by the Spirit, or are you led by the lust of the flesh? That's a question I think we could all, ask ourselves, and really, we need to ask ourselves and just, look at how we live and see what controls our life. Hopefully we're all led by the Spirit. As Christians, we need to make sure that we follow God, that we're following the Spirit, and that we're walking with God every day in our life, that we're always seeking God's will and what God would have us to be doing. It's so easy to, think that we're doing the right thing, but we can say, okay, well, we can see what God's plan is, but we sometimes, I think, tend to, well, if I go just a little bit this way, I'm still technically doing what God wants, but I'm satisfying myself too, and we have to be careful of that. We can't do that. We have to stick to what God would have us to do and not let the flesh, intervene and, come between us and God, because, if we give it an inch, it's going to take a mile. Before we know it, we're away from God, we're out of God's will, we're not doing what God would have us to be doing. The Spirit is never going to lead us down the wrong path in our life. If we follow the Spirit, we're always going to be going down that straight and narrow path that God would have us to be on. But, the flesh a lot of times will paint a nice picture in our lives. We'll see, someone that's got something, oh man, I'd like that, or I'd like to be able to do that. But just because something looks good, don't mean it is good. Just like where the Spirit leads us down that right path. The lust of our flesh will get us in trouble. It's going to lead us down the wrong path. And to be able to live by the Spirit, we have to learn to submit our own desires to God and just seek what He has for us. We just have to, turn it all over to God. And we have to learn to separate the difference and be able to tell the difference in what God has for us and what God wants us to do and what we want. Because we allow that line to get blurred very easily. And it's we're all guilty of it. At some point in time, we all allow that line to get blurred in our lives. We just have to be cautious of it and recognize when that happens and, turn back to God. We'll get ourselves we'll get ourselves in trouble in a hurry following the lust of the flesh. You know, as soon as we get away from what God has and we start going towards the lust of the flesh, we'll have ourselves in so much trouble and so quick we won't even realize what happened. You know, we have to be cautious, you know, and there's always going to be a battle between the spirit and the flesh in our lives. You know, but the closer we get to God, you know, the more we seek God, the more time we spend with God, the easier that battle is, the easier it is to recognize what God has for us. You know, if you only pray, you know, when you need something or when you're wanting something, and you don't have that continual open relationship with God, then that battle is going to be so much harder, because you're not going to be able to tell the difference in what God's telling you to do and what you're wanting to do. Without that relationship, that line becomes blurred very quickly. You know, and it don't mean that we're always going to be in a battle. You know, God's there to help us. You know, God is with us, and as long as we'll allow Him, He'll make that battle easy. He'll be right there with us, but we have to get away from the flesh, you know. And as Christians, we should have that desire in our lives to be led by the Spirit. You know, we should desire to be closer to God. We should desire, you know, to just want to be in God's will all the time. You know, it's such an amazing place to be when you're in God's will. When you can just feel God all around you and everything around you. It's an amazing place to be. Nothing in the world can compare to that. You know, nothing can compare to the presence of God and being in His will. You know, and we should all, you know, the closer we get to God, the easier it is to tell that difference in what the flesh wants and what we want and what the Spirit has us to do. And like I said, we should always desire to be led by the Spirit and to have that close walk with God. You know, we as Christians should always be able to tell the difference in right and wrong. You know, and we should always make the smart, God-led, God-filled choices in our lives. You know, and I just challenge you, you know, as you go through your life, you know, as you make decisions in your life every day, you know, just stop and think, is this something that I want for myself? Is this something that I want to do? Or is this something that God has for me? Is this something that God wants me to do? You know, because if we'll just, before we make a decision, you know, if we'll just stop and, you know, be like, is this God that wants this, or is this me that wants this? You know, just asking ourselves that question can save us a lot of pain, a lot of trouble, a lot of heartache. You know, just is this what God has for me, or is this what I want for myself? I wonder if anyone has a word for the Lord this morning. If not, we'll dismiss our classes.
How is everybody? Jason, close that door back there, will you? Eric, you pray for us this morning.
Lord, we thank you for letting us be here this morning. God, the words that James has said, and Lord, the testimony. God, just giving you praise this morning, Lord, that's what we're coming for. Lord, we pray you help Kevin this morning, Lord, and Lord, and use him. God, I pray we just keep right on learning, God, how to be better Christians, how to defend ourselves, how to keep stuff out of our homes and recognize that. In Jesus' name, Lord, amen.
Amen. That's what we're after this morning. We want to keep certain things out of our homes and out of our lives, don't we? And we want to be able to recognize what these things are, because it's so easy to allow these things into our life and even bring them into our life, not knowing it. You wouldn't believe what a week I've had trying to, and then on top of it, trying to get this together. We've been through a battle this week, ain't we, Eric? But, you know, He's stronger than the enemy, and we have to remember that as Christians. He's in control no matter what we're going through. These things come into our life, and we have to be able to recognize them and know what to do to get them out of there. Raise your hand if you've been looking for curses in your life, maybe something that's snuck into your life. As we talk about this, I don't want you to forget that we need to be looking for our blessings too. I've got many more blessings than I do curses in my life. God's poured His blessings out on me, and I don't want to forget that for even a minute. Last week we talked about a source of curses, and it was the first one was from God Himself. And I told you that God can pronounce curses on people and nations who are disobedient, that live in willful sin against Him. But not for a minute do I want you to think that He's a God who is up there enjoying putting a curse on anything or anybody. He's a good God. He loves us. But He knows how to take care of disobedient people. I want you to think about Adam and Eve just for a minute. You know, when they had their fall, when they were disobedient to the things that God said, God, He could have destroyed them then. And He could have put a curse on them in any way that He chose to do. But what the Bible says is that He cursed the ground. And sometimes when we're disobedient, He can curse the circumstance that we're disobedient in. They never had to deal with thorns and work or anything like that until then. But God chose to bless the to curse the circumstance instead of curse the people in that particular situation. And we have to remember, sometimes the situation that we find ourselves in, we put ourselves there. And God can choose to correct us however He chooses to do so. But it's up to us to see why we're there and what we're being punished for. He's a good God. He wants to bless us. He has a desire to pour His blessings out in our life. I want to start back here in Deuteronomy. I'm going to read this to you. Deuteronomy 28. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, and to observe and do all His commandments, which I commanded thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. And it goes on and gives this list of blessings that He will command to come into your life. And that's the life that we want to live. We want to live a life where God commands His blessings to come into them. But then you look down here at verse 14, and it says, and thou shalt not go aside from any of the words in which I have commanded thee this day, to the right hand, to the left, to go to other gods to serve them. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe, to do all His commandments and His statutes which I command thee to this day, all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. And then there's a list of curses. But the bottom line is, God speaks to us. He tells us what to do. We have the option to do what he says or not to. And that's going to control whether we get blessings commanded into our life or we bring curses on ourselves. We listen to his word. We do what it says. We're blessed. We do what he says not to do. We bring curses into our life. It's as simple as that. Now I want to continue on today. I want to get through all these today of sources of curses. And the last one was a big one. But I think I got 4 or 5 for you here today that we're going to try to get through. And the first one I want to talk to you about, if you'll turn over to Joshua chapter number 6. Is men who speak on behalf of God. Now, after Israel had captured and destroyed Jericho, Joshua pronounced a curse on anybody that would rebuild a city on that site. Raise your hand if you ever knew that. I didn't know that until I studied it out this week, or over the last couple of weeks. Joshua chapter number 6 and verse 26 says, I'll give you just a minute to get there. Joshua 6:26, and Joshua adjured them at that time, saying, Cursed be the man before the Lord that riseth up and buildeth this city, Jericho. He shall lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and in his youngest son shall he set up the gates upon it. Now, this is a very specific curse that Joshua pronounced here. But the long and short of what he said is, anybody who tries to rebuild this city on this site will do so at the cost of 2 of his sons. Now, that is a very specific curse placed on anybody that chooses to try to do what this man of God said not to do. And just like everything else, over time, it was forgotten. We tend to read things in the Bible, and if we don't reinforce them, read them over and over and over time, we'll forget them, won't we? And these are the words of God. But 500 years later, in 1 Kings 16, if you want to turn over there, 1 Kings chapter 16, and verse 34, it says, in his days did Hiel the Bethelite build Jericho. He laid the foundation thereof in Abiram, his firstborn, and set up the gates thereof in his youngest son, Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Joshua the son of Nun. Now, 500 years later, the curse that Joshua pronounced, that anybody would try to rebuild that city would do so with 2 of his sons. And right here, 500 years later, it gives the names of the 2 sons. Now think about that. 500 years from now, we're talking about this today. And in 500 years, who's going to remember what we said? But God didn't forget. The curse was not forgot. In the reign of Ahab, this man, Hiel, chose to try to rebuild where Joshua said to not rebuild. And it says plainly that he done so with the cost of 2 of his sons, exactly to the word what Joshua had pronounced 500 years earlier. So what I want you to learn from this is really 3 things. That what the servants of God curse is cursed. Period. When you speak a curse on something, it's cursed. And the second thing is that when the curse is forgotten by everybody that heard it, the curse is still there. The third thing I want you to see out of this, a curse continues until something is done to stop it. And that's what we're working toward this morning. When we realize that this is happening in our life, there are steps that we have to take to remove it from our life. Okay. What the servants of God curse is cursed. Now we have to think about this concerning our children. The way that we speak to them, the way that, even casually, the words that we say to them, if we're not careful, we speak a curse into their life. We have to correct them, of course, but we have to use positive words in their life. We speak positive things into their life, because once we speak bad things, they remember it. Another example I'm going to give you this morning of men who speak on God's behalf. Turn over, if you will, to 2 Samuel chapter 1. And y'all pray for me this morning. Okay, 2 Samuel chapter 1, we're going to use verse 21 here in just a minute, but let me kind of catch you up. At this point, Saul and Jonathan have been killed by the Philistines, and the Philistines have found their bodies and mutilated them. It says that they had cut off their heads and took them and hung them on the gate of their city. But as we read this, David is going to pronounce a curse here, and we have to understand why he's so upset. Of course, Jonathan was his best friend, and Saul, no matter what happened between Saul and David, David always respected Paul. But there's something more going on here. And in those days, and even now I believe, when two nations were fighting, not only was it just the nation's armies that were fighting, but the gods of each nation were fighting against each other. So in this case, it was the God that we serve this morning, the one true living God, against idol gods of the Philistines. And David understood that a loss for Israel was a loss for God.
Good. Good word.
The Philistines had won the battle, and David's heart was broke. Now look, I want you to see what he says here. 2 Samuel 1:21. Ye mountains of Gilboa. This is where they got killed here. Ye mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offerings, for there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away, the shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. David realized that because Israel had lost this battle, that it was a loss for God, and that the Philistines were celebrating a victory for their gods, and that their gods were celebrating a victory. And he pronounced this curse on the mountain, Mount Gilboa. And from that time until the 1950s, when the Jews started returning to Israel, the ridge of Mount Gilboa was totally bald. And after they returned, the Jews began planting trees in the mountains, and they wanted to create something kind of like our parkway. It's called the Gilboa Scenic Road. And they planted trees all along this road, and they could not get trees to grow on Mount Gilboa. Now this is 3,000 years later. They were very successful at getting trees to grow everywhere except on that one ridge, Mount Gilboa. They had unexpected difficulty getting the trees to grow there. Why? Because of the curse that David spoke 3,000 years before this. Again, the curse continued for years. Now I want to ask you this. Can God's servants still pronounce curses like this?
I think we can, but I don't think we're given the authorization to.
Okay, explain that a little bit.
The Bible, it says in several places in the New Testament, bless and curse not, and that's where I get that from.
It also says the things that we bless here on earth will be blessed in heaven, and the things that we curse here on earth will be cursed in heaven, don't it?
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Okay, so as servants of God, each and every one of us have power to bless or curse. If I speak a blessing on you, God recognizes it. Why? Because I'm a servant of God. But when you speak a blessing over somebody at your work, that person should be blessed because you have the power to speak a blessing. You also have the power to speak a curse. I heard the preacher preaching, and he said, he's an old timer. He said that he preached at a church in Chicago. And he said wall to wall with the church was a bar. And it wasn't just a bar. He said it was a den for prostitutes and selling drugs and you name it. It went on there. And he said, out of anger one night, he stood up and he said, I pronounce a curse on that bar over there in the name of God. And he said, some days later, in the middle of the night, he got a phone call and they said, brother so-and-so, come down here. The church is on fire and it's burning down. And he said it was almost 20 below. And he said he didn't want to go, but he went down there to see. And he said when he got there, it wasn't the church that was on fire, it was that bar. The trouble with it was situated right on the lake, Lake Michigan. And if you spend any time on the lake, you know that the wind always blows from the lake to the land. The bar was between the lake and the church. So the wind was blowing the flames from the bar to the church, right over onto the church. And he said all the people from the church were just standing there watching the flames be pushed over from the wind, from the lake, over onto the church. And the church was going to catch on fire and burn down. Nothing anybody could do about it. And he said as all the church members showed up there, all of a sudden the wind shifted and started blowing from the church back toward the lake, which almost never happens. And he said the next day, that bar was nothing but a pile of ashes. And the church only had a little bit of smoke on it and the insurance covered it. It didn't even cost the church anything. And that's the power that we have as servants of God. We have the power to curse. But now we also have to respect the power that God gives us. I can't get mad at you and pronounce a curse. I could. And you could me. But what would happen by doing that would break both of our hearts.
That's exactly right. It's a good word.
We have power in the name of Jesus.
If we pronounce a curse on somebody like that, smash and stuff, aren't we in a way pronouncing the same curse on ourselves? Because if we're cursing somebody like that, that leaves bitterness in our hearts.
That's exactly right. And there is a curse of unforgiveness that we've all experienced. If I refuse to forgive you, I'm pronouncing a curse on myself.
Exactly right.
Okay, the question was, can God's servants still pronounce curses? We see that we can. We also look in the Word of God that Jesus cursed a fig tree, and it says that it withered from the roots. That's in Mark chapter 11, if y'all want to look it up. But in verse 21, Peter notices the cursed tree after they pass it again. And he remembers that Jesus had cursed it, and he asked him about it. And as Jesus explains it to him, he makes it very plain that there is power in the things that we speak. That's where he says that if we speak to a mountain, it will be removed. And the things that we choose to bless will be blessed in his name. And the things that we curse will be cursed. So yes, we do have power to curse.
I think we also have to remember what it is we're saying a curse on, not necessarily the person, but the spirit behind the person's actions.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, the spirit in that bar was the evil spirit it running wall to wall with the church. If you think about it, it's almost like life. You walk down that alley and you have the choice to either turn and go into the bar or turn and go into the church. And that's exactly how we live our life every day. There's a spirit on each side.
Kevin, one thing we have to remember about all that is God knows the intentions of our heart. And if we are trying to curse somebody because we're mad at them, because they hurt our feelings or something like that, God knows them. And He is not going to act on your anger or on your hurt feelings
That's exactly right.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God that he don't take our foolish thoughts and it's words that come out before we think about it and hold it against us.
Well, that's the thing about it. I mean, we've all spoke words that we've regretted for years. And out of anger, if I said, I curse you, you know, God knows how to take care of that. He's God and we're not. We have to remember that.
Good.
Except be angry and sin not.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, the next one is people with authority. The next source of a curse. Now, when we talk about authority, a lot of the time we'll get ourselves in trouble the way things are right now. But God, in His original plan, gave people authority. He gave husbands authority over their wives. He gave parents authority over their children. He gave teachers authority over their students. He gave pastors authority over the congregation. That's the way that He designed things to work. We understand that, right? We are to accept that. If we are the person of authority, we are to accept our authority. If we are the person who's supposed to be subordinate under that person, for example, the husband and wife, the wife is to choose to be subordinate to her husband. Right? Now this should be in a godly household, but you know how things work. But because of the authority relationship, words spoken by people with authority over the subordinate person have special supernatural power, being it blessing or curse. I can think of two men that are grown men right now, but all their lives, one of their parents at least told them that they were, either through their actions or through their words, told them that they were worthless. And they live their lives today like their life is worth nothing and that they are worthless. And it's a sad, sad situation. It's sad to see. But through the parents' actions and through their words, these two men believe that they are worthless. They have a curse of worthlessness placed over them. Now the Word gives us example after example that the second to God's blessing, the most important blessing is the blessing of the Father. So the most important blessing in your life is God's blessing. But men, fathers, it is important that you speak blessings over your children. This is the second most important blessing in their lives. You have to understand that. Speak blessings into the life of your children. Now, I told you last week that I was going to explain to you how a curse falls on both the abuser and the victim in an abusive situation. Now, a victim has never and will never have power over the abuser. The victim is always the victim. If they are being abused, it's because the person abusing them has authority over them in some way. The things spoken and done by the abuser become a curse over the victim. The victim often grows up, and a lot of the time, not all the time, then becomes the abuser. You see that in your work, don't you? Okay, now I'm going to say that again. I wrote it down so I can get it just right for you. The things spoken and done by the abuser become a curse over the victim. Then the victim often grows up, and very often, but not always, becomes the abuser to those they have authority over. It creates a chain of abuse. First they're a victim, then they're an abuser, and then they pass it on. Then they find a victim, and they become an abuser. And it's a chain that just goes on and on and on. And that's how a curse, the same curse, affects both abuser and victim. Now, in a situation where a husband is abusing his wife, that's always going to be, as long as they're together, he's going to have authority over her and he's going to abuse her. You very seldom ever see an abusive relationship like this just end without them separating. But say an adult over a child, that's where this is going to happen. The victim will grow up and become an abuser because they've been taught and with the same curse as the abuser that showed them how to do it. And until the curse is broken, it continues simply because of the authority relationship. So the teacher can speak blessings and curses over the student. Pastors can speak blessings or curses over their congregations. And husbands and wives can speak blessings and curses over their children. That's just to name a few. Now turn over to Genesis chapter 31. I want to show you an example here of a man who spoke a curse over his wife, and he didn't even know that he'd done it. Okay, up to this point, this is talking about Jacob. He has moved to the land of his uncle Laban. He's married 2 of his daughters. He's become a very successful man. But at this point, he's decided to pack them all up and take them back to the land where he came from. But as this was happening, Jacob didn't know that his favorite wife, Rachel, had stole her father's, who was Laban, false god idols. These were little idols that people kept in their house to protect them. They were called teraphim. And it's a lot like maybe a lucky horseshoe or a rabbit's foot or some superstitious thing like that we keep now. But they were little idols that he cared very much about. He believed they brought him luck. Now, this was wrong on 2 levels, and if you've been listening, you should be able to see right off what the 2 levels are. Does anybody see what they are? The first one is that she stole, which we said last week brings a curse. The second thing is she involved herself in the occult, which, guess what, brings a curse. Number 1, she took her father's stuff. We talked about the scroll that comes to your house and will destroy your whole house because you're a thief. And then, all of a sudden, she's involved in these little gods that Laban cared so much about. So Laban chases him down, and he says, "Why did you leave without letting me say goodbye to my daughters?" And then Jacob says, "I was afraid that you would take them from me by force. Take his daughters back." And Laban said, "Well, I understand that, but I'm not going to take them back." Then Laban said, "Why did you steal my idols?" And in just a minute, we're going to read what Jacob says here, but I want you to remember as we read this that Jacob is ignorant to what Rachel has done. He does not know that she has took the idols. Now look, Genesis chapter 31, verse number 30. "And now, though thou wouldest needs to be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" So these are false gods. "And Jacob answered," and remember he's ignorant here, "and said to Laban, because I was afraid, and I said, peradventure they would take my daughters with me." Okay, right here's where we want to be. He's speaking out of ignorance. "And with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. What is thine with me?" Okay. "With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern you, what is thine with me, and take it to thee." For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. Okay. When all this happened, he searched their stuff, and Rachel was able to hide the fact that she had stolen. But within a few short years, Rachel died giving birth to the next son that she was pregnant with. Why? But probably because Jacob had spoken this curse in her life. Jacob's the one that said, "Let her not live." And there's power in this person of authority's words over his wife. So I'm asking you this morning, please think about the things that you speak to people that you have authority over, no matter who it is. The third one I want to talk about this morning is a self-imposed curse. This is speaking curses upon yourself. Now turn over just a page or two there to Genesis chapter 27. At this point, Isaac was going to bless Esau, but Rebekah came up with a plan to switch them and let Jacob receive the blessing. But Jacob, although he was willing to take the blessing, he was afraid of what would happen if Isaac figured it out. And that he would curse him instead, because he understood, Jacob understood more than anybody in the Word, I think, the power of the blessing and the curse. Genesis 27, we're going to start at verse number 11. It says, And Jacob and Rebekah his mother, Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. And his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son, only obey my voice and go fetch them. Now turn over one page there to verse 46. Now notice that she spoke a curse upon her own self there. Now Genesis 27 verse 46. And Rebekah said unto Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life be? Now she spoke that curse into her life, and now look at the negative language she's using toward her own self. Look at how she words this. I am weary of my life. I'm tired of living. If Jacob, the one that she was trying to steal the blessing for a while ago, takes a daughter that she does not approve of, what good shall my life be to me? She all of a sudden starts using these negative statements about herself. I am weary of my life. I'd be better off dead. Now, we do this all the time without realizing that we do it. We speak a curse into our own life. Who's ever said this? I was too dumb to figure it out. Or I can't do whatever it is that I'm trying to do. Fill in the blank. I'll never be able to. That is speaking against the Word of God. The Word of God says that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Sure. But yet we speak the direct opposite right into our very own life. We'll tell ourselves that we're a failure. We say all these negative things against us, and what we're doing is first we think it, then we say it. Then we hear it, then we think it again. It's the power of four. Everything that we speak into our life is going to come about somehow. So you better speak positive things into your life. Where are we going to get our positive things to speak from? Now, the Word of God. It can come from nowhere else. Okay, this one here's a tough one. The next source that we can bring curses in our life from is unscriptural covenants. And turn over to Exodus 23. And it's very plain here. Exodus 23, verse 32, Thou shalt make no covenants with them or with their gods. Somebody tell me who that's talking about. Huh? Who's it talking about in our life? Unbelievers. And especially people who believe in other gods. Okay? This is talking about idol, false god worshipers. If anybody makes a covenant as a Christian with one of these, we're bringing a curse into our life. I want to give you a perfect modern day example. I hope I'm not going to offend anybody in here, but if you get offended, you probably need to be. The perfect example I could think of is Freemasonry. A person who becomes a Mason makes a covenant with those who are Masons. They are very secretive about what they do, about their rituals and beliefs, and for the most part, they will not talk about it. Somebody tell me why.
Probably because they don't want us to know what they're doing.
Well, that's a good reason. You don't talk about it when, huh?
They swore to an oath that they wouldn't do it.
Probably because what they're doing, they don't, it's something that if they got out, it's something that would make them look bad if it got out what they did. I'm just gonna say it for that.
Okay. The question I asked was, for the most part, they will not talk about it. I've never heard any Mason talk about it. I ask you why. And because, this is the answer, because when they become a Mason, they pronounce a curse upon themselves that they will be punished if they talk about the things that they do. They call a curse upon themselves saying, if I ever speak of the things that we do here, these things will befall me, and it's all kinds of horrible stuff. But they are making a covenant with a false god. If they talk about it, a self-imposed curse will come upon them. That's what we just talked about, a self-imposed curse. And most will not tell. Freemasonry is an idol religion that acknowledges and offers worship to one person named, and I'm probably going to butcher this, Jabal-Am. And it's a combination of Jehovah, Baal, and Osiris. The true God that we serve, Jehovah, is coupled together with Baal and Osiris, who he condemns. And these people offer worship and sacrifice to that kind of a God. Do not make covenants with people who worship other gods. It will bring curses in your life and in the life of your family. It affects everybody. And the fifth one today, curses pronounced by servants of Satan. Witch doctors, medicine men, witches, Satan worshipers, people who practice voodoo. There's a list that goes on and on. Has anybody ever had any experience with anybody like this? Can you elaborate a little bit?
I can. I had a dear girl that I went to church with all my life, and she did not know that she was cursed by her father. He gave her to the devil. And she lived with that curse, and her firstborn child was stillborn. And she had to be delivered from that. I mean, she had, when that spirit rose up in her, that curse and that demon that was put upon her, she had the strength of like someone like that.
Sure.
A very, very strong woman, and she was very small, very petite, and it took two men to control her. But it took fasting and prayer and someone who knew the scripture to come against that and to bind it and loose her. But her father had put that upon her.
And that's a person of authority
Yes,
that placed that right in his daughter's life.
yes.
You was talking about being careful what you let into your life. That's why I quit watching a lot of those ghost hunting shows, because they get into stuff like that. And honestly, I was afraid Hanks were gonna come in through the TV. I know it sounds silly, but I mean, ain't that pretty much what we've been talking about?
That's exactly what we've been talking about. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once it's in there, it's staying. What was you going to tell us?
I saw witchcraft through meth and saw that even get made with total witchcraft and what it done. I saw people with the Ouija boards and go totally out of their mind, putting curses on people and seeing it happen. I've seen a paper swallow table. I've seen a boy get drugged from one wall to the other, and nobody had a hold of it. People just deteriorate
And all this is,
through witchcraft and through curses, and some that will pass generation to generation. Even as simple though as people speaking depression down through generations, and even, you hate to say it, but that little white paper and pen that the doctor carries around writing prescriptions is passing generational curses that's toward Kelly's family, from her grandma, great-grandma to her mom and her mom's sisters, and out of all of them, one come through that. That's witchcraft. It's absolute witchcraft.
that's right.
And it passes generations, but yeah, it is so real.
It is real. And I'll tell you what, our problem as Christians is this. We don't take it as being real.
And even I did some research on the music industry one time, and I'm sure it's the same with television as you, but there's, and I mean, again, this stuff is something man, so you gotta take it with a grain of salt. They said that, a lot of the hit records that came out over the years, that people would get together and put on these records, and pretty much whoever would listen to this music would partake in that curse unknowingly. And you really start to see that today, especially with television. I mean, even like Harry Potter and stuff, they're doing exactly what we're talking about. They're casting spells and, making these potions and all this stuff, and we write it off as child's play, but it's not. It's biblical stuff, and if you're not reading your Bible, you won't recognize it.
That's exactly right. And a lot of the music that we hear, I truly believe that spirits can come right through it into our life.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can feel them.
Look at the places it takes you. When you listen to a song that say you listen to pre-salvation, look at where it takes you back sometimes.
It wants to take you back to the exact place where you enjoyed it before.
Exactly.
Kevin, when you're saved, you're covered by the blood of Jesus. But if you choose to willingly open a door to that, I believe that you can be tormented even though you are saved.
Yeah.
And that's another thing you have to be real careful about, because you can say, I'm a Christian, that's not gonna hurt me, but it's a matter of choice.
That's
You
right.
choose to go back, you choose to open yourself up to that door to be tormented, again, by the same spirit that maybe tormented you before you were saved.
Yeah, if you choose to go back to it, you're going to go back to the same place. That's exactly right. Okay, finishing up here. We're talking about curses pronounced by servants of Satan. Now, do not fool yourself. These people have power, and they believe in what they practice. And we have power, but sometimes I question how much we believe it.
That's the truth.
It's supernatural power, and it's against you. I heard John Hagee preach one time, and he said he went on a mission trip, and I'm pretty sure it was to Peru. And he said as the people would gather in to be ministered to on the mountain behind them, there would be lights that you could see passing back and forth. And you could hear people chanting from the mountains. And what it was is the witches of that country were walking around and chanting curses to Satan to keep the power of God away from that congregation, because they had power over them. They didn't want that power broken. They understood the power that they had. And we better understand the power that we have and that we don't have. I cannot do it myself. Satan is stronger than Kevin Weinberger and Eric Prophet and Doug Hamby and Alan. But the power within us is stronger than that. We have power through Christ to overcome these people. They were down there what?
Beating the drums.
Oh, yeah.
They were beating drums the whole time. Every time they got resolved, every night, they were down there beating the drums.
Well, they have power, and they understand that they have power. But we as Christians, we cannot afford to have the attitude that it's not real. Because it is. They know that they have power. They are willing to use it. They're willing to use it against you, and they are perfectly happy when you just don't believe in them. Our message as Christians is Satan has real power. He is real. But Jesus has more power, and he is real. Now turn over to 1 Samuel 28. This will be our last one for today. Now I want you to see something here. 1 Samuel chapter 28. And we're going to start at verse number 7. This is the witch of Endor. Then said Saul unto her, unto his servants, Seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, that I may go unto her and inquire on her. And his servant said unto him, Behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit at Endor. And Saul disguised himself and put on other raiment, and he went, and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night, and he said, I pray thee, divine unto me by the familiar spirit, and bring me him up whom I shall name unto thee. And the woman said unto him, Behold, thou knowest what Saul hath done, and how he hath cut off those who have familiar spirits, and the wizards out of the land. Wherefore then layest thou a snare for my life, to cause me to die? And Saul sware unto her by the Lord, saying, As the Lord liveth, there shall be no punishment happen unto thee for this thing. Then he said unto the woman, Then said the woman, Whom shall I bring up unto thee? And he said, Bring me up Samuel. Now this is important. And when the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spake unto Saul, saying, Why hast thou deceived me? For thou art Saul. And the king said unto her, Be not afraid, for what sawest thou? And the woman said unto Saul, I saw gods ascending out of the earth. And he said unto her, What form is he of? And she said, An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. And Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. And Samuel said unto Saul, What hast thou disquieted me? Why hast thou disquieted me? Bring me up. And Saul answered, I am sore distressed, for the Philistines make war against me, and God has departed from me. And that's a scary place to be right there. And answereth me no more, neither by the prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. Then Samuel said, Wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee, and is become thine enemy? And the Lord hath done to him. And he spake by me, for the Lord hath rent his kingdom out of thine hand, and given it to thy neighbor, even David, because thou obeyest not the voice of the Lord. What's the first cause of curses to come in your life?
Disobedience.
Now listen to what it says. Because thou obeyedest not the Lord, or executed with fierce wrath upon Amalek, therefore hath the Lord done this thing unto thee this day. Moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines, and tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. Now I'm going to ask you this question. Was it Samuel that was brought up?
Probably not.
How come?
Well, I don't know. That's just my knee-jerk reaction. The Bible says that when you die, you either go straight to heaven or straight to hell. There's no in between. My theory is that instead of Samuel, this was something that was pretending to be Samuel.
Good. Good job, Philip. This was not Samuel, and this is how I know. We know about the void between the rich man and his brothers, right? He could not go back to them. Once you pass over, there's no going back to see the people that you left behind. This was not Samuel. I also know this because everything that this image that Saul talked to here, everything that it told him had already been spoken. It didn't give any new information. It didn't tell him one single thing that Saul hadn't already been told, except for this. Tomorrow thou shalt be with me, you and your sons, and the Lord shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. This woman pronounced a curse through this image into the life of Saul. That is the power of these people that work for Satan. They can convince you of anything through the power that they have. This woman had real power. She could deceive Saul easily. And there are people with the same power right now that would love to use it on you and your children. Tanner, you pray for us.